Okay, so yesterday we were talking about being higia lahora, reaching the level where you can give hora, right? So let's reread the Rambam, restate what we came up with, and then isolate the questions again, and then see where it takes us. So it's in Hilchos Samator Perek Chamishi Halacha Gimel, and it's Halacha Gimel 3 in the Makbili version. Below Kol Misha Meis Rabba Mutter Lo Leishav L'Horos B'Torah. Not anyone whose Rav dies is it permissible for him to sit and give Hora in Torah. Elim Kain Haya Talmid Shehigia Hora, unless he is a Talmid who reached Hora. So the problem is the Rambam doesn't define that, right? So we defined that yesterday, just in light of the way the Rambam talks about halacha, which is being able to descend to the omic, Omko Shal Talmud, and knowing the derech Talmud, and then when we didn't read this yesterday, but when he describes how he got the psak in the Mishnah Torah, going through all of the Mishnah, Sifrei, Braisos, Toseftos, and the Gaonim, and everything like that to figure out what the halacha is. But I don't know of a description of the Rambam of that process. It's possible buried somewhere in the Hakdamah to the Parish Mishnah. Then he describes it a little bit more, but I don't recall. Not isn't necessarily becoming a more hora, but describing like what it would mean to give hora, by going through like the sources and stuff. Because I know he talks about in Machlokas about like the role of svara, but that's also at the time of the Chazal. Like I don't know if he talks about it in terms of what we do. Yeah. So that was what we kind of answered that based on our own experience, help together with the Rambam, and then that's kind of one of the functions I'm hoping that R Moshe will do today. Okay, R Moshe Feinstein, not R Moshe Ben Maimon. All right, v'chol talmid shelo higia lahora umore. Any talmid who has not reached hora and gives hora, harizeh shota rasha v'gas ruach. He is a fool. He is haughty, and he is and he's a rasha and he's haughty. So we said what that means is he's a fool because he clearly does not understand what psak requires, right? So like he has a distorted understanding of the material. Gas ruach, because he thinks he's on a higher level than he is, and Russia is he's causing destruction to society by giving out psak that's not valid. V'alav ne'amar ki rabim chalalim hipila. That's what Mishlei means when it says that the Isha Nachriya has felled many victims. V'chein chacham shegiya lahora'ah. The Eno More, a Chacham who has reached Hora and does not give Hora, Harzeh Monea Torah, so he's withholding Torah. That makes sense, right? That if he's capable of doing it and he doesn't, then literally he's just withholding Torah. V'nosing Michshalos Leifnei Ha'ivrim, and he's placing stumbling blocks in front of the blind, which we said means that if his psak would be better than anything that is the alternative, like he knows the halacha and people are otherwise going to be acting on ignorance or on their own inference, so then, he's allowing them to stumble. And again, I know Rav Pesach went into the sugya of Lifnei Iver, in part. Oh yeah? When? Recently or? Oh yeah. Okay, fine. All right. So I did not know that. Okay.
I don't recall going through a lot of Rambam.
Right. In the sugya itself, yeah. So either way, I was going to say I don't know if this is literally based on what Rav Pesach said about Lifnei Iver on the Sunday Shir 2 weeks ago. Then it does not seem like you would literally be over Lifnei Iver by just not giving psak. Sounds more like a description of the consequences or of the behavior, like philosophically or ethically, than halachically. But Alav Nemar va'atsumim kol harugeha, mighty are all those she has killed. Okay, so then he says, so we basically figured out that thing. The only thing that we didn't quite work on is how this fits into the Isha Nachriya mashal, and it's not clear to me. Like, I think we'd have to go through the Rambam Shita on that, which I'm not prepared to do at the moment. That Rabbi Zimmer had 25 shiurim on that last year. So if you're interested, then go to that. Okay. I mean, he probably has a couple shiurim just on Perek Shvi'i, but the Rambam uses that as a paradigm for Mishlei. Okay. Elu HaTalmidim HaKtanim. These are small, unqualified Talmidim, Shalhir B'Torah Koroi, who have not amassed Torah in the proper amount. V'heim Mavakshim, he's got to be Amei Ha'aretz Uvein Anshe Iram, and they seek to be glorify themselves in front of the ignoramuses and in front of the people in their city. The Kovtim Yoshim Barosh, they leap and jump to sit in the front. Ladun al Horos B'Israel, to adjudicate and to instruct in Israel. Hein Hamarvin as Machlokos, they're the ones who increase Machlokos, so that is clear because they're not qualified and they are setting themselves up as leaders. and they're going to disagree with each other, and they're going to disagree with the great poskim. Okay, so that's destroying the world. That kind of throws into question my interpretation of Russia in the previous paragraph, because I said Russia meant that they're causing harm to society, but machrivin sa'olam is really the term the Rambam uses for destroying society. So I don't know what Russia means up there. It's hard for me to say that someone who's shelo higia lahora amora is automatically a Russia. Maybe he just misjudges his level, I'm not sure. Okay, they diminish they extinguish the ner of Torah, which we said means they dilute what real godless in Torah is. And they destroy the vineyard of Hashem, Master of Legions. And this is what Shlomo says in Shir Shirim: take for us foxes, small foxes that destroy vineyards. Okay, so I looked into this a little bit. Okay. Immediately was deterred because Shir Shirim is one of the hardest things to learn, and I've never had success learning it. Okay, so I could not find the source. Just tell me again what that Soto reference is. Right before Shir, and by right before I mean right now.
Soto Zayin on Des, Rabo Machlokes Yisrael.
Oh, okay.
And this is Va'ayin Shel Shuvas Hagon Sharet Shuva Sama Kuf Pei Zayin.
That might Shel Shuvas Hagonim, you said. That's interesting. Yeah, so that's for the Rabo Machlokes. Okay, fine. So the Shari Tshuva. Not familiar with a Shari Tshuva going called Shari Tshuva. All right, so I'll have to see if I can. I'm not going to try hunting that down now.
Also, I'm not sure how all titles of movies. Remember one thing where it was we're claiming Zohar as a source for something?
Yeah, right. I mean, they're the most not thorough. What's the word I'm looking for? They try to be the most thorough in finding the sources of the Rambam, like more so than.
So does he see somewhere in his Hakdamah that his only sources are Bali, Yerushalmi, Sifrasi, Free Mishnah?
He does say that, but it's unclear to me if that's an exhaustive list, or if he just means like the works of Chazal that he talked about in the thing. So anyway, the reason what we're talking about here is we found sources for all of the Rambam statements in Gimel and Daled, but this last thing, this drasha on the pasuk Shir Shirim, comparing people who are, Talmidim Katanim to Shualim Katanim, we didn't find a source for that. Okay, so we've got a double problem. Number one, well, I mean, it's a related problem. I can't understand the plain shot of the pasuk, and number two, I can't find a source. However, I did find something. So the Ralbag has a whole thing on Shir Shirim. Ralbag holds that Shir Shirim is basically an allegorical guide to Avas Hashem, like in terms of what the soul needs to do in order to be perfected, to have knowledge of God that leads to Ava. So I just right before, I'll show you in 1 second. I'll say the title. I think it's easier that way. In Ralbag on Shir Shirim 215, that's the title. That's the source. Okay, let's read this because it might be relevant. I just snapped a picture of this right before I left. Take us the foxes. So the translation: take us the foxes, little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. This is Menachem Kellner's translation, which, by the way, if you're ever going to do Ralbag and Shir Shirim, it is almost impossible to read him in the Hebrew, because I mentioned Ralbag has a lingo, jargon, and in Shir Shirim, when he's talking about like the soul and cognition, forget about it, like rely on Kellner. Since in addition to attraction to the physical pleasures, there exists other impediments to apprehension, meaning intellectual apprehension, these being the mistakes which occur because of estimation and imagination, which bring us to think the accidental to be substantial or the non-existent to exist, or vice versa, these additional impediments ought to first be removed. So far, so good, right? This is done with the art of logic, which guides the intellect so as to preserve itself from these mistakes and to adopt the order and way by which the truth is determined with respect to each thing. The intellect said, so basically saying that I think this is in the parak about things that are impediments to grasping the truth. So he spends a lot of time on how attraction to pleasures, impedes the truth, but he's saying here also that your imagination can cause you to mistake the accidental for the essential, or the non-existent for the existent. And the cure for that is the art of logic. So let's see how he interprets this in our pasuk. The intellect said that this is Shir Shirim personifies the intellect. I think Shlomo, he learns as a muscle for the intellect. The intellect said that they ought first to take away these impediments, lest they destroy that which they worked at. Such destruction would be easy for them because they are still at the beginning of estimation. So he's saying that the foxes are people who have not reached the level of perfection in the art of logic. He allegorically said that they should take away these foxes, which despite their being little, spoil the vineyards and destroy their fruit-bearing capacity. They must especially take away these foxes since their vineyard is in blossom. That is, since it already started delicately producing its fruit and could be destroyed by the least of causes. So this is an interesting mushal, okay? And I think it's not unrelated to what we're doing here. In the Shir shiurim and the Ralbag, what he's saying is these are people who are, if the vineyard had not started growing yet, so then there's only so much damage you can do. Like if the seeds are underground, so to speak. I mean, I don't know if you do seeds or shoots, however you grow vines, right? But it's these people who have started developing their intellect, but it's not to full maturity, and then they mess it up while it's maturing. That's like the most efficient way to destroy a vineyard. You know, if you want to go out and destroy a fully mature vineyard, good luck. You're gonna have to like tear down all the grapes. But if it's just, you know, I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but like in the mushal of the arba shniknasu lepardes, kotzitz benetios, like uprooting the shoots. You know, you're destroying something at its inception. So I could see, again, I'm not saying that the Rambam holds that is exactly this, but it works out very well with the Rambam that these people who are only in the beginning levels of their development in Torah and think that they're masters of halacha and immediately start doing the trigger happy like paskining based on like you know what little research and what little knowledge of halachic method they have, they're gonna destroy their ability to develop in learning the art of svara and psak, and they're gonna ruin a lot of other people's stuff in the process. So I think that's the closest thing I found to a source for the Rambam. Take it or leave it. Okay. So let me ask you a question. All right, we're poised to do the Hakdamah to Iggros Moshe, but I realized also as we're doing this, I realized as we were going to do this, we could take a fun detour. Okay, and the detour. Oh, it's already a fun detour. Okay, but this made me realize a fun detour in the Rambam. Okay, and there's a fun detour as a shortcut, and there's a fun detour, the scenic route. Okay, the fun detour and I don't think we would get to this today, but maybe we could start it. So the fun detour, that's the short thing, is smicha according to the Rambam. Okay, and smicha, in other words, smicha like real smicha. Okay, and this is connected. This is in Sanhedrin stuff. So it's connected not in the sense of directly about Talmud Torah, but it's connected in the sense of having halachic authority. Okay, but then the place where it connects here, and this is the scenic route, is smicha b'zman hazeh. Okay, which is directly an outgrowth of these halachos that we're learning. It's just the Rambam does not address smicha b'zman hazeh, but if you look at the poskim on it, notably the Aruch HaShulchan, it is exactly what the Rambam's talking about here. So, and that's what R Moshe is going to touch upon a little bit. Okay, yeah, and it wouldn't be like a long thing. Yeah, we're definitely gonna do the R Moshe first. Yeah, that's gonna ease us in. Now let me explain why we're doing the R Moshe. Okay, R Moshe, there's a secondary reason and a primary reason. Okay, the secondary reason is he does give a good description of what it means to Paskin. Okay, but that I feel like we have an intuition about already. But what he gives the main reason why I show this is we all know R Moshe as the Gadol Hador of his time, right? If you listen to the way he talks about his own qualifications, I think it should give us all pause in terms of thinking about how knowledgeable we are in halacha, and like make us even more afraid of giving hora'ah than we might have already been. Okay, so it's like that's to me is the most impressive thing about like when Rebbe gave when Rebbe Che gave a eulogy for Moshe, which is in the tape library. The thing that the quality he highlighted the most was his humility, is his anava. And I think the phrase he used, and I don't know if this is Rabbi Chait's phrase that he coined, or if this was something that people said about R Moshe. He said I think he said he's a gaon in anava. Like he's a genius in anava, not genius like intellectual genius, but like when people talk about gaonim, like the great ones, that was his true greatness, you know. And I'm sure a lot of people said at his eulogies, you know, Ha'ish Moshe Anam Mikol Ha'adam Asher Al Pnei Adamah, but it's from the people who knew R Moshe, apparently like it was true. Okay. All right, so let's do this R Moshe and we'll see how far we want to go. Okay, it's only 2 pages in text, but I wanted to do mainly the first 2 paragraphs. Okay, so he says like this. This is the Hakdamah to Iggros Moshe, which is his chuvos. Hine sifri zeh sherubo hu masha shavti masha hayanir lafianis dadi lahoros halacha lemaisa leilu shirata leda dati. So this book of mine, the majority of which is my answers in that I responded, in that which seemed, according to the paucity of my knowledge, according to my anias dati, according to the poverty of my knowledge, to Paskin in Halakhah lemaisa for practical purposes, to those who want to know my opinion. Okay, so he's saying this is a book of my answers to these practical questions. Even though it would have been proper for me to refrain from answering in a practical way, many of the greats of the world in Torah have, and in fear of Hashem, have refrained from paskening out of Mi Rasa Mimamar Rabbi Abba Amar Rabbi Huna Amar Rav Besota Daf Chaf Beis. They've refrained out of fear of that statement of Rav Huna Amar Rav, which says Rabim Chalalim Hipila Zain Talmid Chacham Shelo Higiel Hara Umore. She has felled many. This is referring to a Talmid Chacham who has not reached Hara and gives psak. Va'af Amar Gam Va'atsumim Kol Harugeha Ze Talmid Chachamim Shehigiel Hara Ve'eno More. Even though it also says that if though might all of those who she has felled, that's a Talmid Chacham who has reached Hara and does not give psak. Umitam Zeh Kasaf Rabbi Akiva Eger Huva b'Hakdamas Banav L'Sefer HaTshuvos Shelo. So this is why Rabbi Akiva Eger, who wrote, this is why he wrote in the introduction. It's unclear to me. He must mean in the introduction of his children to the Sefer Chuvos, but it must be quoting his actual thing. In other words, I guess he didn't write a Hakdamah, but his children compiled one, and he wrote this. He says, "V'dai asher hutzrachti lahashiv l'shoalai midaga shabal eya bichlal kol mi she'igil harav eno more." So he says, it's enough for me that I needed to respond to those who asked me questions out of concern that maybe I'm in the category of those who have reached psak and didn't give psak. Okay, so you see, Rabbi Akiva Eger was machmir the other way, right? That he was concerned maybe I'm not on the level, but maybe I am on the level, and if I don't paskin, then that's going to be bad. So that's why he wrote his psak. Okay, so R Moshe is saying maybe you'll say that like I should hold like Rabbi Akiva Eger, and like be worried on that side instead of the other side. I lost my place. Mikol makom elu shenimneu hu me'achar shegam ata tzarich hamora lahoros ka'amitus hadin. I was trying to figure out whether this is a typo. Elu shenimneu. No, it's not. These people who refrain, me'achar shegam ata. That's for the reason because now tzarich hamor lahoros, the posek needs to paskin ka'amitus hadin, according to the truth of the law. Okay, so this is where we get. By the way, if you ever want an interpretation of elu ve'elu dever lukim chaim, this is the best interpretation I've seen. Okay, I mean, it's R Moshe is going to go into it. Okay, so this is where it starts though. It says you need to paskin the posek needs to paskin according to the amitus hadin, the truth of the law. Okay, so the question is, what does that mean? Kamosh hayat tzarich lahoros b'mei Rav v'Rav Huna v'Rabbi Abba, as he needed to paskin in the time of Rav and Rav Huna and Rabbi Abba. Okay, lachein, therefore, af shevadai b'chol dor hu mida acheres lahachshiv higila hora. Even though definitely in every generation there's a different standard for what constitutes reaching the level of paskining. Okay, because no one's going to say that like, oh, Moshe Rabbeinu died, so no one can paskin anymore because no one's on the level to give psak, right? So he's saying it's definitely going to fluctuate in each generation. Only these chachamim in this generation can paskin, and it's their responsibility to paskin. We can't get the same level of poskim in the later generations as we did in the early ones. Eno rak al elu she'igil hara bizmanam davka. So when the Chachamim talk about people who have reached the level of paskin, they definitely mean in their generation, not on an objective scale. Ella, I've lost the beginning of the sentence, by the way. Ella af al pi she'igil hara b'doros elu shemechuyavim lahoros Zahura Rabbi Akiva Eger, Mikomacham Yesh Vadai Al Kol Echad Lachush Shema Eno Mechavim Keha Okay, so all right, this is a separate consideration. He's saying like this: even though in every generation there's a different standard for being on the level of Paskin, and even if you are in that standard, nevertheless, every person should be worried. Maybe I have not reached the truth in my psak. Okay, and therefore mitzad hayira, out of fear, they have decided, meaning these people who refrain from paskening, they've decided that they are not able to to arrive at the precise truth of the law, and they cannot paskin. Okay, so in other words, like this, he's saying there's two things: are you higila hora'ah, and will you paskin? So he's saying there are people who are higila hora'ah in their generation, but because they're worried, maybe they're not going to get the right halacha, so then they refrain from paskening, even though they're on the level. Okay, well, what about Rabbi Akiva Eger? B'shani Rabbi Akiva Eger, she'af achar kol hachashashos hora, Rabbi Akiva Eger, who after all of the worries still paskined, beheshiv lamaisa, and he answered according to practical halacha, he's different. Why? Mitam hachiyuv she'alav midin higil hora derav. He had to paskin because of this din of one who has reached the level of psak, derav guvre, because he was a great guy. That's the phrase in the Moshe Rabbeinu. And he was able to assess himself. Okay, fine. I don't know why he's focusing on Rabbi Akiva Eger. Was he like the biggest psak before Moshe Feinstein? Like, I feel like there were. I mean, I know Rabbi Akiva Eger is famous for his Shas stuff, but I like if you ask me. Yeah, I'm not like if someone asked me like who the greatest poskim were in the generations before Rav Moshe, I can name a lot of names. Yeah, it could be that's true. It might just be he wrote about it. Yeah.
Well, two possible answers.
Sure.
Not necessarily exclusive to each other. I'm pretty sure he's more like important or focused on, I guess, and slightly more right wing.
Rabbi Akiva Eger?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which I think Rav Moshe was a little more right also. So the thing is kind of like
Yeah, but what do you mean by right?
like not like already, but like you put like a spectrum of like modern Orthodox
In terms of what though?
in terms of what do you mean in terms of what?
In terms of
What we
like
talked about
politics?
last week. No, like in terms of like okay, I don't know the word. What?
You mean like the student influence?
Well, what about modern Orthodoxy?
You should.
I was saying you like Gary saying he wasn't.
I think like more yeshivish people talk about him a lot, but I know.
Yeah,
I know
so,
like in my experience, but like I
right.
went to a yeshivish camp growing up as a kid
Yeah.
for like a decade,
Yeah.
and he was spoken about a lot. But I
Right.
know
Well,
that-
here's the funny. Yeah.
Or is it like what Gedolim are saying are it's not yeshivish that they're the is it very slow basics, but other than that, who else?
I think this is going to spiral into a weird type of
For sure,
speculation
absolutely
about
will.
who's.
No,
But
I think it might just be a case study and post-game or people who could have been post-game but didn't want to be.
right, I'm just wondering why he's like singling out Rabbi Akiva Eger. Yeah.
I think more than I mean,
Right. That's also true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I also honestly don't know when Rabbi Akiva Eger lived. Rabbi Akiva. Right. Right. 1761 through 1837. So that's earlier than I thought he was.
So what was Rav Moshe?
Rav Moshe
I
was
know when he like died around, but I don't know when he started his career.
1895 to
Yeah, so-
1986. Yeah. I'll tell you though, it's funny that you mentioned that, and I'm just going to mention this because it's I don't know how much this is like written about, but Rabbi Chait got to meet from Rav Moshe, and he said that before Rav Moshe became famous for being Rav Moshe, they made fun of him and they called him Makil Moshe, which means that they made fun of him for being like not Machmir, So, and then he became Rav Moshe, like, and then like that's what happens to a lot of Gedolim. They're made, the Rav was also made fun of during his lifetime by his detractors, and then like people revere him after death.
Actually, I remember sometime one of my uncles was saying something like that in comparison to my great grandfather.
Right. Okay. So where were we here? So Rabbi Akiva is different. Rabbi Akiva Eger is different because he knew how to. He was in that category, definitely, and he knew how to estimate himself and knew that this was the right chashash. The Imkain, Koshkain, oh, now he's here, he described himself. Imkain, Koshkain lekatni erech kamoni. All the more so to someone who is of little value like myself. She'ein bi Torah v'chachma karoi. I don't have the proper amount of Torah and chachma. Shehaya li limnoa milahoros legamre. I should refrain from pasking altogether. The Koshkain milaha'alos al hadafus. All the more so, I should refrain from publishing. Shehu kihora alachol ha'olam, which is like pasking for the whole world. Okay, right? So this is a big question. Why Rav Moshe? Not why he paskin. I mean, it's a big question apparently why he paskined, according to him, which he's going to answer in a second, but why he published it. And I do recall hearing, I don't know if this is written, that he was against people translating his chuvos, because that would make it like accessible in a way that it would get into the hands of people who don't even know how to like learn at all, you know? So, okay, so then why, so Rav Moshe, why did you paskin? Okay, that's what we're asking right now. So why does he paskin? So he says like this, Aval, humitam shahanachom afionis daiti bezeh, shahayu rashayin umuchuyavim chachmei doros hachronim lahoros, af shelo hayu nechshavim higil lahorab doros chachmei hagemara. So he says, I think that the chachamim of the later generations who would not be considered higil lahorab based on the standards of the Gemara, they are obligated, they're permitted and obligated to paskin. Why? Because sheyesh vaday lachush ulai lo chibnu amitus hadin kfi shu ms klabi shemaya, even though they could be concerned that maybe they have not reached the truth of the law vis-a-vis heaven. Okay, aval ha'emes lahora'a kvar nemar lo bashmaihi. But the truth in terms of hora'a, it has already been said it's not in heaven. Ella kfi shenira lehachacham achrei ayin karoi levarer halacha b'shas uveposkim kfi kocho b'kovid rosh uviyira mihashem yisale. But rather, according to as the chacham sees it, after his analysis, his proper analysis and clarification of the halacha and shas and poskim, according to his ability and the solemnity and fear of God. Now, let me stop. This is a big point here. Okay, so let's go over basics. What is the definition of truth? Okay, right. In standard talk, what is the definition? When you say something is true, what do you mean? Either statement or an idea.
That statement or idea is accords with the way the reality is.
Correct, right? So truth, the definition of truth is correspondence with reality.
Yeah.
What was that?
One of the definitions.
Yeah.
That's the only definition of truth. And this is an interesting one. Okay, that's the only definition of truth.
That's the only true definition.
No, it's funny. It's the definition of truth in matters of empirical fact. Okay, the funny thing is that and this I only know because of the of Syntopicon. Okay, you can read up on the Western truth, that even those who try to deny the concept of the human ability to obtain truth, everyone's arguing pretty much everyone held by this definition of truth up until like the 1700s. And then even the ones who argue against it are arguing because like the human mind can't perceive the truth, but they're arguing against this definition of the truth, you know, that the truth is the correspondence between the mind and reality. Or if you're talking about truths of statements, the correspondence between statements and reality. Okay. So there are people who hold that the mind can't know truth, but this is what truth would be if it were there, you know? So that's the definition of truth, let's say in matters of history, science, you know, empirical things, okay? And what Rav Moshe is saying is like this. He's saying there is a, so to speak, empirical definition of the truth in halacha, which is what he's calling emes klape shemaya, the truth in heaven, which is when God gave the mitzvah of tefillin, the parshios were either like Rashi or like Rabbeinu Tam, okay, right? Or maybe some other possibility, but that's unlikely, you know, right? So it's one or the other. So that's the emes klape shemaya. But so he's saying that is what one definition of truth would be. He says, but when it comes to psak, that's not what the psak is obligated to find. He says, what the psak is obligated to find is, I'm going to highlight this to show that it's important. Okay. Lo b'shamayim, he means, ella kafi shenira lehachacham, rather truth is defined as what the chacham, what is apparent to the chacham, after she'ian karoi, after he has analyzed properly, levarer halacha, to clarify the halacha, b'shas, in shas uva poskim and in the poskim, kfi koko, according to his ability, the kovid rosh, with proper like seriousness, uva yira mehashem yisala, and fear of God. That's the definition of truth. Yeah. He's going to go on in a second, but yeah. Yes.
They were Vadai wrong 100%.
Right. I think he's going to quote that. Yeah. I think he's going to quote that. And if he doesn't, then I'll summarize.
What did you say?
The Moshe or he's saying that truth is not defined as what God gave from heaven,
Okay.
right? It's lo b'shamayim he. It's defined as whatever the Chacham sees after he has investigated all the sources with proper analysis and solemnity and fear of God.
Well, I mean, truth of Horah, not the truth of the din.
Truth of Horah, truth of psak. Okay, so he's going to go on. He's going to explain. Veneer lo shekain. Oh, sorry. Veneer lo shekain hu psak adin, and it seems to him, to the posik, that this is the psak ha'emes lahora, that is true for instructing. U'mechuyev lahoros kain, and he is obligated to pass in this way. Af im be'etzem galia klape shemaya she'eno kain ha'perush, even if vis-a-vis heaven, the truth is not according to his explanation. Okay, and that's what we mean when we say that his words are also the words of the living God. Because it seems true to him, pasak, as he paskin, and there are no contradictions to his words. And he will receive reward for his psak, even though the truth is not according to his perush. Okay, now he's going to quote, I think.
That's really weird.
Yeah, so just to summarize again here. So what we're saying is that there is, so to speak, let's call it the empirical halachic truth versus the halachic reality truth. Okay, the empirical halachic truth is what God gave to Moshe at Sinai. Okay, or how it exists in God's version of the Torah. Okay, right? But that's not what we are obligated to do when we paskin. That's what we were given, but we, members of the learning community throughout the ages, are obligated to try to the best of our knowledge and ability to analyze the sources through all the ages with the proper fear of God and to reach the conclusions that we think make sense. And then once we reach those conclusions, that is the halachic reality truth. Okay, even if it's not like the truth in God's Torah, right? And yeah, let's see his proof, because I think he's going to say. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, this is why I wanted to do this. Yeah. Umechuyev lahoros. Oh, we read that already. Okay. The kabbal I read that already also. V'hochacha gedola zeh lezeh mihad deshabes daf kuf lamed amar Rabbi Yitzchak. A good proof for this is what it says in Shabbos 130 in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak. Ir achas haya haisab Eretz Yisrael. Shayu osin Rabbi Elazar probably, or Eliezer. I don't know. There was a city in Eretz Yisrael that they acted in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer. V'nasan lahem hakadosh baruch hu skar gadol shemesu bizmanan. God gave them a great reward that they died in their time. I didn't realize that was a reward. Okay, I guess so. I guess most of us shorten our lifespans. Because gazra malchus harasha'a gezera al hamila lo gazru al osa ha'ir. And when the evil government made a decree against Bris Milah, they did not make a decree on that city. Af sha'emes ali b'dodina nifsak shlok Rabbi Elazar. Even though the psak, the truth didn't follow the psak of Rabbi Elazar. And it was on a matter that you were chayiv skila if you did b'mezid and chatas if you did b'shogeg. So we're talking like the most serious level of halacha ever. Rabbi Eliezer, I wish I knew if it was Eliezer or Elazar, his psak was such that according to the actual halachic empirical truth, you'd be chayiv skila, but he paskin according to the way his mind saw fit. And not only did they not get, skila, but God protected them and rewarded them. Alma, so you see, the emes lahora, that truth in psak, shemechuyev lahoros, which you're obligated to paskin, v'gam mekabel schar, and you also get reward for hu kfi shesover hachacham achrei yuno v'chol kocho afsha emes mamish eno kain. That the psak the truth in psak that the posik is obligated to paskin and he gets rewarded for is what the svara of the chacham is, masha sover hachacham, after his analysis with all of his ability, even though the truth, the real truth is not like that. This is all the machlokus of all of our rabbis, rishonim and achronim. Shezeh oser v'zeh matir. This one is prohibits and this one permits. Shekol zman shalon nifsak kachad, as long as it is not paskin according to one of them. Kol echad lahoros b'mekomo k'moshe sover. Each one can paskin as his mind makes sense to his mind. Afsha din hamiti hu rak echa mehen, even if the objective halacha is only like one of them. Ushnei chachamim mekablim schar al hora asam, and that's how you both chachamim will have reward for their psak. Umitam zeh matzino harbe chalukim gam beisurim chamurim. Bein b'makomos hanogim lahoros ka Rambam v'beis Yosef, bein b'makomos hanogim lahoros ka chachmei atosos u'kaharama. Even so, that's why we see many chachamim differing even on stringent matters. And in some places they pass like the Rambam and the Beis Yosef, and in other places like the Chachmei Tosfos and the Ramah. Ushneim hem divrei Elokim chaim. Both of them are the words of the living God. Afsha emiti galia klapi hashmaya. Even though the true truth vis-a-vis heaven, shehu rak echav mehem, is only like one of them. Okay, and I think this would be a good place to ask your questions. But first, let me just do. Maybe he doesn't talk about the ovens of Akhenai. So let me just quickly. I think what the Akhenai ovens. Oh, so then we should definitely do this then. I happen to have a PowerPoint, do I? Isn't it what?
Either the Baskel where.
Yeah, it's the Baskel Gemara, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, all right. I think this is the PowerPoint. We're just gonna go through really quickly here. Bav Mitzia Nun Tes Amud Beis. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm gonna do the test here. Okay. So it says like this. So this is what we're looking at. Oh, if you're in Rapis is not doing ovens in Bav Mitzia. He's doing ovens in Shabbos, right? Okay, fine. I was gonna say you got ahead of the game here. Okay. So it's some weird coiled oven. Okay, and this is in a matter of Tumat Tahara. So it says it was taught Hasam there. Chatchu chulios v'nasan hol ben chulio. If you cut this oven into segments and place sand between each segment, Rabbi Eliezer metaher v'chachamim metamim. So Rabbi Eliezer says it was tahor, and the chachamim said it was impure. Okay, Tana, it was taught. But also yom, on that day, Heshiv Rabbi Eliezer kol atshuva sheba olam v'lo kiblu himeno. See, Rabbi Eliezer refuted every objection to his psak in the world, and they didn't accept from him, right? So hold on, which one did he say? He said it's tahor, okay? And he answered all their questions, but they didn't accept it. Amar lahem, he said to them, Im halacha kamosi, if the halacha is like me, charov zeh yochia, this carob tree will prove it. Immediately, like Magneto, only over carob trees. Ne'akar hacharov mimkomo mea ama. So the carob tree got like levitated, and then it like flew 100 amos. Okay, v'amri la, and some say arba meos amos. Some say 400 amos. Okay, big difference. I don't know what the difference is. I never know what to think. We had this with the benches in the base midrash, right? Like that day, there were 100 benches open. Some say 400. I don't know what it was.
I mean, very off topic, I guess. But what do you do when you see that kind of thing?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what to do.
Look at in like
On a Messiah's fact, that doesn't seem to matter. I don't know. Yeah. So in some cases, like you could tell the whole thing is allegorical and there's an idea in the diuk. This doesn't read like that, but I'm sure there's those who take it that way. Amrlo, they said to him, we don't bring proofs from carobs. Okay. Chazar v'amar lahem, he said to them again, if the halacha is like me, amas hamayim yochichu, this stream of water will prove it. Immediately, Chazar amas hamayim la'achorim, the stream of water flowed backwards. Amrlo, they said to him, we don't bring a proof from a stream of water. Okay, he's pulling out all the stops here. Chazar v'amar lahem, he said to them, Im halacha kamosi, if the halacha is like me, kosle beis hamidrash yochichu, the walls of the base midrash will prove it. Hitu kosle beis hamidrash lipol, the walls of the base midrash leaned into fall. Ga'ar behem Rabbi Yoshua. So Rabbi Yoshua rebuked the walls of the base midrash. Amar lahem, he said to them, Im talmid chachamim menaslim zeh zeh b'halacha, atem mati v'chem. If talmid chachamim are vanquishing each other in halacha, who do you think you are to like fall down on us? Lo naflu mipnei kvodosh Rabbi Yoshua, v'lo zakfu mipnei kvodosh Rabbi Eliezer. So they didn't fall because of the kavod of Rabbi Yoshua, and they didn't straighten up according to Rabbi Eliezer. See, even they're makbid in the kavod of Rav, v'dayin matin v'omdim, and they're still leaning to this day. Okay. Chazar v'amar, again he said to them, Im halacha kamosi min hashamayim yochichu. This is the famous line. If the halacha is like me, a voice from heaven will prove. Yatzas baskel v'amra, a voice from heaven went forth and proclaimed, Malachem ito Rabbi Eliezer, shahalacha kamoso b'kama makomos. How can you compare next to Rabbi Eliezer? The halacha is like him in many places. Amad Rabbi Yoshua al Raglav. Rabbi Yoshua stood up. Wait, did he not stand the last time? Hold on. Oh no, he was sitting and rebuking them. Okay, but this one gets him to stand up. Okay, he stood up al Raglav and said, Lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven. My lo b'shamayim hi. What is meant by not in heaven? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Shekvar Nasna Torah Me'ar Sinai. once the Torah was given at Har Sinai, ein anu mashgichim b'vaskol. We don't pay attention to the vaskol, to a heavenly voice. Shekvar kasavta b'Har Sinai b'Torah achari rabim lahatos. The Torah already said in Har Sinai, you should follow after the majority. Now, again, this is in a time when you paskin based on the majority of the Sanhedrin. What R Moshe is talking about is way after the Sanhedrin when we don't have this. Okay, so we don't go by the majority anymore. Okay, hold on just a second though. And then we get the epilogue. Ashkechei Rabbi Nassan le'Eliyahu. Okay, this is the after credit scene, right? Rabbi Nassan encountered Eliyahu, Amar Le, and he said to him, what did God do at that time when this whole dialogue was going on? Amar Le, he said to him, Kachayach. God laughed. Amar, and he said, Nitzchuni banai, Nitzchuni banai. My children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. Yeah, great midrash, right? Yeah.
If we say we can't bring a proof from a character washing, how can we bring a proof from the fact that a government decreed not by a specific town?
He's not bringing a proof for halacha. He's saying he's bringing a proof. Yeah, he's bringing a proof that you get rewarded for it. And in fact, he's saying that even though the halacha was not like the absolute truth was not like him. Yeah.
So what's the proof the reward for it? Like he's using it as not part of
part of
an argument for why to show the Paskin, even if you were not to get Dean MS.
No, I don't think he's bringing it as right. Yeah. It's not like right. He's showing that God gives you reward for that. Because you could say like this. What's the argument? What's the other position? You could say that obviously ein ladayin elamasha ein avros. That obviously a chacham can only paskin based on what he sees. But you could say that if you paskin wrong, then God counts it as an avera, or God does not reward you. He's saying no. This guy was 100% wrong. I don't mean this guy. Rabbi Eliezer was wrong in a matter that it was chayav skila, and yet God rewarded him for his psak. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to ask your questions now? Because that was what I wanted to read, and we might go on. But
why say that there is this like absolute truth, but it doesn't matter? Why not just say that like there is no absolute truth?
Because there is an absolute truth.
Well, then why don't we care about it? But if there is one, then why don't we care about it? And if we don't care about it, then how could there be one? I mean, it seems like these two things are
Yeah. I feel like I mean, there are a lot of people who don't care about science, but that doesn't mean that scientific reality doesn't exist, right?
But we don't say let's say we understand that there are laws of nature and
right
and whatnot, but we don't go and say that any physicist can go make a whatever formula, not make a whatever formula, but he can study and make a whatever formula, and as long as he thinks that it's true, it's fine. No, we would say that you have to compare it to what the actual.
No, but you are trying to find the objective truth. You are trying to do that, but the thing is that the validity of the. So let me give an analogy here. Let me give an analogy that is not in abstract science, but in, let's say, like medicine, right? So let's say like you have a rash, okay, and you go to one doctor and he says it's an allergy, and you go to another doctor and he says it's cancer, okay. So unless you got really unlucky, it's probably only gonna be one of them, okay, right? Or both of them are wrong. Right. Yeah. So when each doctor gives his diagnosis and his prognosis or his prescription or whatever, so then they are trying to get at the objective reality, but the validity of their prescription or their diagnosis is dependent on whether they succeeded. Right. So there's a real reality, but then, the medicine doesn't do anything if it is cancer and it gives you allergy medication, right? It's just a completely baseless, valueless, a procedure, right? In halacha, we're also trying to get at the absolute truth, but the uniqueness about halacha is that what matters is not whether you actually got there, but what matters is that you're following chachma according to the chachmas Torah and the chachma of your Tzelem Elokim, and that's what the system of psak is based on. So it's not. So we are trying. So why does it matter? Because we are trying to get to the absolute truth. But we can. The only one who knows the absolute truth is Moshe Rabbeinu, and theoretically another navi could also get the absolute truth. But God prohibits us from relying on nevuah when it comes to matters of halacha because the system has to be a system of chachma. It is a unique system. We don't do this anywhere else. The only other place where you can arguably say that we do this is in math, because math is also not empirical. Okay. And in math, it's just whatever makes sense to the mind of the mathematician is the truth, is mathematical truth, and in certain areas of philosophy, there's first order and second order philosophy. First order philosophy is philosophy about the world and about reality. Second order philosophy is philosophy about the categories of mind and about logic. So I don't know about second order philosophy, but in first order philosophy, then they're also trying to get at the absolute truth. And you could say that there's some areas where we will never know whether we got the truth, but what philosophers are trying to do is to get to the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah, Joseph?
I have them right. Just go to the discussion doesn't really like it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
let's say some opposing Paskin or something,
Mhm.
and it happens to be that it was against the absolute truth.
Right.
Would that be a bad thing?
So that's a very good question. Okay. So I think, and this is me, this is not R Moshe.
Okay.
I think it depends on the framework. Okay. So if you're talking halachically, like, are you involved in any sort of isser? So the answer is no. You're 100% fine, and God rewards you for your psak, and you're relying on your Hakdamah, and the system carries on. Okay. However, insofar as God did give a system, okay, I'm going to limit my answer to Doraisas.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm not. Okay, I'm going to give two different answers, one about Doraisas and one about Rabbanans.
Right.
Insofar as there is a Torah that God gave at Har Sinai, Doraisas, right? And that the mitzvahs are there for our perfection, and they have certain ideas in them or certain functions in them. So theoretically, if you paskind in a way that deviated from the purpose of the halacha, then that would result in a loss of like certain ideas. Okay, I'll give you an example of this. Okay, Pru Revu is a mitzvah doraisa, I think according to everybody. I don't know about the Bahag, but I think according to everyone, that it's a mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. Okay, and there's a machlokes in the Gemara about whether the minimal obligation is to have 2 sons, okay, or to have a son and a daughter, who each of which is capable of like reproducing, and the Gemara brings a raya for the son and the daughter from Gan Eden, I think from Adam and Chava, and then brings a raya for the other shita from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, I think, had 2 sons, So I think, and again, I don't know the sugya, but I think that like I suspect that your philosophical understanding of what the mitzvah is would differ depending on which view you hold, Now, they don't paskin based on the philosophy. I'm saying that the philosophy would be an outcome, and like, let's say the mitzvah Pru Revu is somehow, Pru Revu is presented to Adam and Chava in the Torah. So like, and that's how we paskin. So we're only going to think about Adam and Chava. But let's say like we did paskin according to the other shita that had to do with like the sons of Moshe. I think that would like result in a different way of understanding like what the what the perfection of the mitzvah is. So you could lose out if you're deviating from the divine intent, if you got the psak wrong, or theoretically in the tefillin thing also, right? The different order of the parshios, like if that matters, and presumably it does, then you're going to get a different idea, And so that's by Doraisas, and then by Rabbanans, you could also argue that different psak has different ramifications in society. So like last year in Rabbi Zimmer's Shir, then he did the how you divide your learning time, a third in Torah Shvichsav, a third in Torah Shalom, a third in Talmud. And last year I gave a whole rant /shir on how the fabric of society has been changed based on the psak of the Bali Tosfos, who hold that nowadays we just learn Gemara and we're Yotze everything, as opposed to like, the Rambam, who says you learn a third, and a third. So like both of them halachically are valid. That was, it was in 2021. It was last academic year. No, it was the last academic year. Yeah. Oh no, I know why you're thinking of this. We read it this year in Rambam Bekius, but I gave a separate shir on it in Chumash methodology last year. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. So in other words, that results in, it changes the entire fate of the Jewish people, right? Halakhically it's valid, but it changes things, So that's my answer. And last answer is like practically, like let's say like you have a woman who has a medical condition and she's pregnant, and one posik says that she needs to get an abortion, and the other one says that it's usher. That's going to affect the life of that woman and that kid, and there is an objective truth, right, about like what the actual halacha is, but halachically they're both following halacha if they follow whichever posik. Yeah.
So you would say that there is some negative of Paskin against the executive.
There could be.
We wouldn't know.
Right. There could be, and it doesn't always have to be, because there are many, I would argue the majority of cases of psak, there's not going to be any ramification in terms of perfection. You know, like I don't think any, and in terms of practical like stuff, it's just in these, either in the core structural cores of the mitzvah where the perfection resides, or in terms of the sociological impact or ethical impact or whatever, or like the practical impact, you know, then there will be like these ripple effects. But yeah.
So but if you're supposed to go by your chachma, let's say you have a gospel coming down and telling you this is what we do, but your chachma says something else.
You got to go by your chachma, yeah.
Why? But by what you're saying, shouldn't I follow the voice of heaven?
Well, it depends on how you relate to the voice in heaven. Okay, in other words, if you are, if the voice in heaven says something and your mind says the opposite, and you're like, I'm going to follow the voice in heaven, that would be wrong. But if you have your own like svara, and then the voice in heaven says something, and you're like, that's a good svara, right? So now you're following your mind, and the source was a baskol, but like that doesn't really matter, you know. And the way I know this is in terms of the halacha about a navi, right? So if a navi says, you know, the halacha is like Beis Shammai, you know, and you follow him because of his nevuah, then that is usher, and the navi is a navi sheker, and you kill him, right? But if there's a guy who happens to be a navi, but he gives you a good svara, you know, so then like, and you follow it because of the svara, then you're really not following him, you're following the svara.
But why would that be the case? Why wouldn't we want to listen to whatever that navi says or listen to whatever the Bible says? Because they are navi, because they are
Right. So I that
obviously that must be the thing.
but that gets down to the core of what R Moshe is saying, which is that the system of halacha is one where we follow chachma, we follow our minds, we don't follow what God gave us, even though we are trying to use our minds to understand what God gave us. And this is why, for example, almost every machlokes Tanaim usually is like one genius and everyone else, and everyone knows that he's a genius. You know, Rabbi Meir was a genius, and everyone always disagreed with him. So, like, why don't they just defer to him? Because the halachic system requires that you go by your own mind. And so they probably were like, okay, fine. Like, I'm sure Rabbi Meir, like, there's a high odds that Rabbi Meir is right, but we have to follow our own mind. You know, it's a system of following your mind.
So what about like Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai? Why was he told
right? So
why didn't he
yeah, so that is the only possible exception. And the reason why I'm saying it's the only possible exception is because I don't know, like everyone after Moshe, what they say is their understanding of Torah. What Moshe said was not his understanding of Torah; it was Torah. That's why we call it Torah's Moshe. And that's also, I think, why, this is my theory. I don't think it's a crazy theory, but, you know, in the Gemara, there's sometimes like a hyperbolic statement where let's say we're two, Tanaim, and we're arguing, and like you give your svara and I give my svara, and then you assert your svara, and I say, I don't care if Yeshua ben Nun said it, I still wouldn't accept your svara, right? Now, why do they say Yeshua ben Nun? Because if Moshe said it, that would be Torah. You know, and I think that just has to, I don't know how much that has to do with the fact of Moshe's intellect being like absolutely unique, or if it's because that's what defines what Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu's, the thing that Moshe gave us from his mind is what Torah is. So, you know, disagreeing with Moshe would be like denying Torah, whereas disagreeing with your interpretation of Torah would be just me disagreeing with your interpretation of Torah.
It sounds like Moshe wasn't going by his own chachma, he was just going by whatever he was told.
Yeah,
which
right.
sounds like a bad thing.
No, because when I say it is Torah, I mean that was what produced Torah. Like the form in which the human intellect of Moshe got Torah is what is Torah. Like God didn't give Torah like in a scroll that just fell from heaven. He gave it through Moshe's intellect. Okay. You know, so like, and this is, I don't understand, like, look at the second Epilogue with the more Nebuchim for this stuff, and don't, because you won't understand it. But no, like that's where the Rambam deals with what is the unique nature of Nevuos Moshe. I don't know where I don't know, but in principle, I'm saying the direction of the answer lies in that like Moshe's Torah is synonymous with Torah, and like it's a different category than anyone who came after Moshe. Yeah. And not just because he had the greatest intellect, it's because Torah was produced through his intellect. Yeah.
I'm really thinking that You're not trying to get in the line, like because you jump into the things of the fact that we are limited, whenever it's working,
Mhm.
I had to think of that like, oh, if you got wrong, then everyone messed up. It's not like it's
Right.
and we're all messed up now. That's
Right.
the thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of the things that I wrote that.
Right. Right, that was at the source. Right. Yeah. Right. Although I'll tell you, right. I'll tell you one thing though, and this is something that I've never quite understood the position I've heard stated here, and it might be that I just don't understand the position because I actually have not heard this from Rabbi Chait himself, but like, you know, the question always is like this, right? Let's say the machlokes in tefillin, right? If we found Moshe Rabbeinu's actual tefillin, okay, and we knew 100% it was Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillin, then would we change our psak or not? Okay, so I've heard the answer given here that the answer is no, we wouldn't, because okay, so it could be from the Rav. I mean, but so yeah, this is the tchelas question. I just didn't want to stray into that that thing, but it's the same principle, the tchelas thing, right? You know, so I've heard the answer that we would not rely on that because that's not like a method of psak and halacha of like relying on archaeological findings or whatever, you know. And I agree that we wouldn't just, I don't think we would just blindly accept it, you know, like let's say we found a thing that was, okay, we wouldn't blindly accept, but what we would do, I think we would like, I don't know, I think it would weigh in differently in assessing the psak in the same way as, for example, let's say hypothetically, let's say just extreme hypothetical. Let's say there are fake versions of the Mishnah Torah floating around out there, okay, with errors, right? And we found out that the thing that we thought was Rambam Shita is not his Shita, and then we found out what the Rambam's actual Shita was. I think it would change the way that we assessed, like what, you know, how much weight we give this. We give a different weight to what the Rambam writes than to what like an 18th century printer writes, right? So I think if we found something that we knew 100% was Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillin, it would affect the way that we weighed the machlokas. And the nafkamina is, I think if we found Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillin and it was not like any shita that we had, I don't think we would follow the thing there. I think that would be, because I think that would not be following along, like that would just be like, that would be like relying on a boss. Oh, sorry, you know what? I hate to do this today. I have to go exactly right now because I have to tutor right now. But let's continue the discussion tomorrow. Do we want to finish this? Yeah, and had you guys been through this before, this Hakdamah to Iggros Moshe? Okay, it's really good, isn't it? I mean, it's like the clearest expression of what it means to Paskin that I've seen written out. And I mean, I don't mean to like weigh in on Moshe. Good job, Moshe. But I mean, like, I just think like people need to know about this. It's just a really good exemplification of how we Paskin. Okay, all right, Bli Neder, we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.